What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you're excited because we have some breaking news, some brand new news. The Dallas Cowboys predictably are placing the franchise tag on running back Tony Pollard. This, of course, is not shocking if you have been paying attention for some time now. About this time a year ago, I would say, for the last 365 days, or rather 365 days ago, it felt like Tony Pollard was going to be playing his last year for the Dallas Cowboys. Entering training camp at the very least, it felt like the running back room was going to look very different come 2023 because Tony Pollard was entering the final year of his rookie contract, because Zeke Elliott was on the final year of his contract with guaranteed money. We'll talk about Zeke in just a moment. But I would say sometime around November, maybe around the Vikings game when Tony Pollard went off and the Cowboys went off, it felt impossible for the Cowboys to let Tony Pollard walk. Predictably, to use that word again, he was an incredibly explosive player for the Dallas Cowboys. There are many of us who have been calling, who have been screaming, who have been shouting for the Dallas Cowboys to use Tony Pollard more, really from about day one. In 2019, when the Cowboys took Tony Pollard in the fourth round, it was very clear, it was very obvious that he had a level of elusiveness, of explosion, and a level of toughness that I think is still underrated when it comes to Pollard's game, that should have been utilized more and more and more and more. And that's what kind of makes Pollard unique. Yes, his rookie contract is expiring, but he doesn't have as much wear and tear as a normal running back who reaches the end of their rookie deal. And so that is obviously exciting. But Tony Pollard is obviously coming off of a fractured fibula, which was suffered in the season-ending loss against the San Francisco 49ers. That's all part of the story. But we know that the Cowboys are placing the franchise tag on Tony Pollard. They've been kind of talking this offseason so far about how this was going to be the case. The tag value for Tony Pollard now is $10.091 million. If you want to round it, we can round it down to $10 million, make it nice and easy math. Tony Pollard slated to make double-digit $1 million here in 2023, and that could change. That could change in a number of different ways, because the franchise tag, while it exists, is kind of a placeholder, and that is a term that we hear a lot of teams use when they use it every single year. We've heard the Cowboys use it in the past for other players. And why is it a placeholder? Because the Cowboys now have until July 17th to work out a long-term deal with Tony Pollard. Maybe they don't want a long-term deal. Maybe the Cowboys want to see this one-year deal for Tony Pollard. Maybe they are a little bit spooked by the injury, and maybe they want to see Tony Pollard play this thing out on the franchise tag. Maybe Tony Pollard doesn't want that, right? We have a long way to go, a lot of discussions, a lot of reports, a lot of rumors, but the Cowboys do obviously have 4 months now to figure out a long-term deal. In case you're new to this whole experience, if the Cowboys and Tony Pollard do not have a long-term deal in place by July 17th, Tony Pollard has to play the season out on the franchise tag. That is not a negotiable thing if you go past the deadline. We saw with DeMarcus Lawrence, we saw with Dak Prescott. Players are unafraid in today's day and age, which is a very cool thing to see, to play on the franchise tag and put their future into their own hands. Again, we'll see if that ultimately comes to be the case with Tony Pollard. The Cowboys could very well negotiate a long-term deal with him before then, as mentioned, but the Cowboys are obviously going to be hoping that Tony Pollard gets healthy. He did have that fractured fibula in the divisional round loss to San Francisco, but Stephen Jones did say in the lead up to the NFL Combine that the Cowboys expect Tony Pollard and Terrence Steele, for what it's worth, to be ready for training camp. This is a very exciting thing. Tony Pollard is not just one of the most explosive players on the Dallas Cowboys. He is one of the most explosive players in the NFL. We are talking about one of the most talented, one of the most elusive, one of the most electrifying players with the football in his hands. And Mike McCarthy, as we all know, is going to be calling the plays for the Dallas Cowboys offensively in 2023. You have to figure that he envisions Tony Pollard as a big part of that process. And if they don't, then what are you doing this for? Because this is a team, the Dallas Cowboys, that has devoted a lot of resources to the running back position. And while Tony Pollard is very talented, and I can sit here and I can argue with you about how this is a good thing, because on some level, it is a good thing. You're keeping an explosive player in your offense. I understand he plays running back. I understand that position is devalued. I understand that you can find other explosive players at the running back position seemingly more easily than you can at other positions. But it is a running back, right? That's kind of the con to all this. And the Cowboys, as mentioned, have devoted a lot to the running back position. I talked about how they drafted Pollard in the fourth round back in 2019 and how he became one of the most explosive players in the NFL. That happened because they spent a day 3 pick on him in 2019 versus the 4th overall pick on Tony Pollard's predecessor in Ezekiel Elliott, right? They spent the 4th overall pick on Zeke in 2016, and they doubled down on it with a $90 million contract extension that they handed to Zeke just a few months after they drafted Tony Pollard in 2019. And so now the Cowboys are obviously in a position where they have spent the 4th overall pick on a running back. They have handed out a massive second contract to a running back. They have now spent a franchise tag on a different running back and Tony Pollard. That is a lot. We're talking about tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars that you are spending at a position that you can seemingly find similar production at a much cheaper cost. So there are cons to this idea. Tony Pollard, though, is seemingly more talented than the average running back and can help you kind of overcome that because of how you can hopefully utilize him in a number of different ways. But all of that is obviously for Mike McCarthy to figure out as he details and envisions the offense as we talked about. But what is up next for the Dallas Cowboys, now that this Tony Pollard thing is taken care of, for the time being, the leftover conversation, as mentioned, is what are the Cowboys going to do with Ezekiel Elliott? Again, he has no more guaranteed money left on his deal. The Dallas Cowboys can save about $10 million if they designate Zeke to be a post-June 1st cut. June, an important time in the NFL for budgetary, financial sort of receipt purposes, if it is an obvious June, July, et cetera, et cetera. And so you could kind of, not Indiana Jones idle swap their places on your salary cap at $10 million, but you kind of can, right? If you cut Zeke and do designate him as a post-June 1st cut, and you obviously have Tony Pollard on this franchise tag, it's kind of $10 million in one hand and $10 million in the other. Now, the problem, if you cut Zeke and designate him as a post-June 1st cut, is that $10 million is not available to you until post-June 1st. That's why they call it a post-June 1st cut. But either way, the Cowboys, not even from a financial perspective alone, they have to figure out what they're going to do with Zeke, because is this going to be Tony Pollard's backfield? Are you placing the franchise tag on him just for him to come be some complimentary player, right? If you're spending that much money on the running back position, again, a position where that idea as a whole is a debatable one, you should be making sure that you maximize your level of investment, that you are getting a massive return on investment. And if Tony Pollard is just kind of your 1B back to 1A, or even just your 1A running back, you're not necessarily putting yourself in a position to get a high yield in that sense. So we will see what the Cowboys do with Zeke Elliott. They obviously now have placed the franchise tag on running back Tony Pollard. It is exciting. I know that we can feel different ways about this, but we can celebrate the fact that the Cowboys are going to be keeping a very good football player in their roster, on their roster, in their team, in their lineup, whatever you want to say. Tony Pollard not going anywhere. 2023, a critical year for the Dallas Cowboys, for Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott, for every single person involved. And we now know at the very least that Tony Pollard is going to be a part of it. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on TikTok at rj.ochoa. You can send me an email if you'd like, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com, or you can leave a comment down below and we'll do our best to get to those. How do you feel about the Cowboys placing the franchise tag on Tony Pollard? Again, it was expected, but we all have thoughts, we all have emotions, and we would love to hear yours. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll see you next time.